to roll out what is actually happening in the state grand jury. So first off, this is a very, very complex case. It was very involved, as you all can see from the press release that we put out earlier, that this is a case that involves 29 defendants being charged with 62 counts and 79 charges. So those 29 individuals have been charged. Those charges involve 21 charges of criminal conspiracy, which involves 0 to 5 years. We have 3 charges of murder, which is a minimum of 30 years to life. 27 charges of assault and battery by mob, death resulting, which is a minimum of 30 years. 4 charges of assault and battery by mob, serious injury resulting. That's a 3 to 25 year penalty. And then 24 counts of prisoners carrying or concealing weapons, which is a 0 to 10 year offense. Just to kind of remind all of you what happened that night. This involved 2 gangs in 2 different wings of Lee Correctional facility. There was one incident in where one gang killed and stole the contraband off of an unaffiliated inmate, an inmate who was not a member of the gang, but was a well-liked inmate by everybody on that wing. Another gang retaliated for that killing against the gang that did the killing and the stealing of the contraband. And from that retaliation, members of the gang that were retaliated against had a contraband cell phone. They were able to communicate across the prison to another wing, to another dormitory, to let them know that members of our gang were just attacked, which, as you can all see, was an escalation where that gang then retaliated against members of the gang in the other dorm. So it led to a very complex set of facts that could not have unfolded but for the fact that those contraband cell phones had made it into the prison. This is something that Director Sterling has been a big leader on. It is something that, for those of you who covered the Cash Cow grand jury case a little over a year ago, this is just as illustrated in case after case after case. Back in the old days, there was commerce by gangs and members with inmates within the prison system, but the ability for them to have contraband cell phones has allowed that commerce, that illicit commerce, to grow. And that commerce has created turf wars amongst the gangs that are already in prison. There's always been gangs in prison, there's always been commerce, but now the stakes are bigger. Those contraband cell phones, just like in the previous grand jury cases, allow for very complex, convoluted systems to sell illegal and illicit contraband within the prison systems. That leads to more violence, that leads to more illicit drug money and more weapons coming into the prison system. Not just within the prison system, but gangs are actually running their illicit businesses from inside the prisons. And that night, on April 15th of 2018, the ability of them to conduct that commerce with the illicit contraband cell phones enabled them to basically start a mob riot within the prison system. And I want to thank the Third Circuit Solicitor, Chip Finney. I want to thank Mark Keel, Chief of State Law Enforcement Division. I want to thank Director Brian Sterling. I want to thank Sheriff Daniel Simon with Lee County. And I want to thank members of the South Carolina Attorney General's Office who work in the State Grand Jury Division, because that investigation began with those agencies back in 2018. And as that investigation unfolded, it became apparent to everyone involved that the complexity of this case was so great that in December of last year, members of that special team, and you can see them here today, not only do we have Solicitor Finney here, but we have former Circuit Judge Knox McMahon, who was a career prosecutor, who is now the Special Assistant Solicitor, and he is going to be aided by former Solicitor Barney Gazay in working with our office as we move forward to prosecute this case in General Sessions Court. But their hard work, and these agencies' hard work, and the officers, many of whom you see here today and some you'll never see, led this case to come to the state grand jury last December. The state grand jury immediately got to work, working with these various officers and agencies. And of course, as everyone knows, we hit the ground running in 2020, but the COVID pandemic hit all of us in numerous ways, and it kind of slowed this down, which is why we were able now, toward the end of the year, to basically unveil the work of the state grand jury, which led to all of these indictments. Again, I want to thank members of our team. Craig Waters is the leader here in the state grand jury. I want to thank all of the agency leaders and directors and members of their team and staff who made today's announcement possible. Our job is to basically enforce the law, not just out in the communities, but even within our correctional system, because the inmates are being the rewards of the state at this point, and we have a duty to investigate and protect them and also protect the public at large, because that violence does spill out into the community. So, at this time, I will invite Solicitor Chip Finney to come forward and make a few brief remarks. Solicitor Finney.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, General. I'm here on behalf of the citizens of the Third Circuit to thank the partners that we have at the State Attorney General's office and the grand jury, along with our investigating team, special prosecutors, and SLED, as well as the police side of the DOC, Department of Corrections. We have had a very good working relationship over the last 2 years, and we are very thankful for the help and the resources they have given us. This was a very complicated case. You can imagine investigating a crime scene inside a prison in one of our counties here, Lee County. It was tedious. The first thing these criminals did was to destroy the videotaping system so that there wouldn't be good evidence to use. And of course, everybody inside the prison, basically besides the guards who were at risk that night, were inmates. So we had a very complicated job. It was done professionally. It took a long time, but the fruits of our labors are now being rewarded with these indictments. I want to thank the grand jury, the state grand jury, for their assistance, and we look forward to bringing these criminal actors to justice. Thank you very much.
I'm Brian Sterling, Director of the Department of Corrections. First of all, I'd like to thank Attorney General Wilson, head of the State Grand Jury, Creighton Waters, members of the Grand Jury, SLED Chief Mark Keel, his agents, Lee County Sheriff Daniel Stodman, who's right here, and Solicitor Finney, who just spoke, our STDC agents. These are some of the agents that worked on the case. Also, I'd like to thank Judge Knox McMahon and former Solicitor Barney Gazay for agreeing to be part of this prosecution. They bring decades and decades of experience. The reason we're here today is because of illegal cell phones, which fuels contraband, which stokes violence inside of our correctional facilities, not only in South Carolina, but across this country. We need to be able to block these illegal cell phones, which are essentially a weapon in an inmate's hand. We've seen this not just in South Carolina, but across this country. Federal Bureau of Prisons is allowed by federal law to block these devices, but states cannot. We need Congress to act and pass legislation allowing states to block these illegal cell phones. We've proven just recently that the technology exists to block these cell phones. And also, we've proven that the cell phone industry is wrong when they say there's going to be bleed over. I literally walked into a dorm where we had the devices turned on. I was on the phone with our head of security. My phone worked when I was right outside. I took one step inside and my phone did not work. So this is a call to Congress to amend the Federal Communications Act and allow state prison systems to block these phones over and over. We're in front of y'all. We were with Sheriff Lott a little while ago. We're here. We see it. We were here in the grand jury. We were at the U.S. Attorney's Office. We keep on seeing people being victimized and violence being perpetrated because of these cell phones. It's got to stop. It's a public safety threat. Folks think, okay, someone's being sent to prison. They watch it on TV, read about it in the paper, and think, society is a little bit safer today. Little do they know, and they're quite surprised to know that they're able to access the internet, re-victimize people, and continue to commit crimes from behind bars because of these cell phones. I think the Attorney General will take any questions, or anybody else will be ready.
Thank you, Director Sterling. At this time, one last thing. I was reading over everything, all the work that had been done, and as all of you know, yes. Oh, thank you, Director Sterling. It's hard to keep forgetting to take these things off. Yesterday, there was a bond hearing held for four of the inmates involved in that correctional facility riot back in 2018. All four were involved in the riot. Three had gotten, basically had finished their time and were out, and that's why they were in bond hearings. One of those individuals was notably, I think Michael Wine Smith was the 5-point shooter who years ago was one that shot a young woman in 5 points, paralyzing her. Y'all remember that case? It was very highly covered in the media. And he was, his case was recently overturned, and he's being set for retrial, but he's being headed out of an Glen Detention Center. So he is incarcerated right now, but he is not at Lee Correctional Facility. All of the other defendants in this case will obviously be dealt with in due course, but we wanted to make sure that we got the bond set for those individuals who were not there at that time. At this point, I'm happy to entertain any questions or invite people up here to answer questions.
Gentlemen, can you briefly elaborate on the conspiracy charges, kind of in layman's terms, what those are and why there's so many of those, how they played into?
We have Assistant Attorney General Creighton Waters, who actually led that part of the grand jury, and I'll let him address that question.
Thank you, and just real quick, I want to echo the thanks to all the folks up here and all the people that aren't up here that have worked very hard on this. I want to thank, in particular, the State Grand Jury Division staff, which have worked so hard on this. I want to thank the police services agents at SCDC that worked so hard on this, and then Chief Keel. I want to really thank Chief Keel for the 2 agents that he has assigned to this, among others, but the 2 primary agents are some of the best agents that I've worked with, and they really are instrumental in moving these things forward. As the general described, generally factually what happened here was this started in the F3 dormitory at Lee Correctional. There was an unaffiliated individual by the name of Michael Millage, and he was attacked by 2 G gang members, DeMonte Rivera and another individual. He was killed and contraband was stolen from him, and the blood numbers in that particular dormitory had enough, and they then retaliated. They killed Mr. Rivera. They ended up killing another inmate in that particular dorm. And from there, of course, as has already been explained, by cell phone, information about that attack by the Bloods on the G's spread to F5. And in F5, the Crips and the G's were banded together, and they outnumbered the Bloods at that point. They led all the Bloods outside of the dormitory into this breezeway that was fenced and had razor wire at the top. Ultimately, many of these inmates throughout all the wings are armed with homemade weapons. They have shanks, they have hatchets, they have axes, they have body armor. And the Bloods were led out, and eventually the group of Crips and G's attacked those Bloods. The Bloods tried to escape down the breezeway. Many of them tried to escape over the razor wire. 3 individuals could not, 3 Bloods. That was Mr. Jenkins, Corey Scott, and Raymond Scott. Raymond Scott was a high-level Blood member. And of course, from there, the cell phones instantly report to F1, where the Bloods outnumber anyone else, that Raymond Scott had been killed. And at that point, the Bloods sought to take out revenge on the Crips. Most of the Crips were able to barricade themselves into one cell. However, one Crip, Cornelius McClary, got caught out in the open, and he was stabbed repeatedly by multiple individuals and ultimately perished as a result of that. And of course, these are just the individuals who died. There were a number of inmates who were attacked that ultimately survived. If we look at the indictments that we have here, we have the first conspiracy, that's count 1. And if you look at the individuals who were charged after that, that are in that conspiracy and then charged for the substantive crimes, those all deal with the individuals who were allegedly part of the conspiracy that killed Cornelius McClary in F1. If we look at count 2 and the individuals who were charged there and then look at their substantive offenses, those represent the individuals who were in F3 that allegedly committed the violence there. And then finally, in count 3, that third conspiracy, those are the individuals, if you look at the named victims and look at the allegations there, those would be the people who allegedly committed crimes in F5.
Can you talk about whether you got the inmates to cooperate, or whether you mentioned that the video was destroyed? So, did they cooperate? What was the difficulty of that, or what other kind of physical things were you able to look at?
I don't want to comment specifically on what evidence we have, for obvious reasons, but I will say that obviously trying to investigate a crime within prison is more complex than most crime scenes, and it was not only complicated by the events of that night, the need to restore security, and the fact that it was also raining that night. There was a lot of impediments there, and there was attempts obviously made to destroy evidence, but that's all I'd like to say about that.
And obviously, it's been mentioned that the pandemic kind of delayed things for 2020, but can you talk about, it had been, 2.5 years, so what made things take longer heading into 2020?
The grand jury got started in December of 2019. Obviously, we all hit shutdown in March. As you're well aware, there was a lockdown for a period of time. Director Sterling had to be particularly sensitive about the lockdown because the last thing that he needed was to have rampant COVID going throughout the institutions. The grand jury has kept working. The state grand jury has continued. We got back started in May, and we've actually been conducting grand jury sessions through remote means in a manner approved by the judge. So we have been able to work through that. However, the COVID has affected, like everyone, it has affected the ability to access evidence, to access witnesses. People are out, people are working from home, they just slows things down.
Are any of those 29 in Mississippi, or are they all here in South Carolina?
I'm not sure of that, Director.
I do think, maybe one or two in Mississippi, we can get to who's there.
Are they being brought back, or how's that being handled?
We'll discuss that later with the grand jury when they want them back, but we can easily do that.
Yeah, and just to clarify, Director makes a good point. When I say the G's, the gang, that's a sort of the short version of the gangster disciples as a general sort of daughter. So we've got three main gangs here. We have the G's, or the gangster disciples. We've got obviously the Bloods, and then the Crips. There were bond hearings, as the Attorney General said yesterday. Those bond hearings were for the 4 individuals who are not currently incarcerated in SCDC. We went ahead and got those. It will be a later time to be determined when we will conduct the bond hearings for the remaining 25, all of whom remain incarcerated in SCDC.
And I believe Christie has handed out the face sheets, so that would have the locations of everybody and their histories also.
What motivated this to begin at the beginning? Why was this man killed initially, and then it kind of snowballed from there? What was the motivation for this hit, I guess, and then going forward?
Well, I mean, obviously, they wanted his stuff, and they didn't like him, and so that was probably motivation enough. Again, one of the things I was talking about earlier is that while the first death in this series of events was an unaffiliated member, one of the things I want to underscore, and Director Sterling has really been a leader on this issue, is, the contraband cell phone issue in the prisons is a real serious issue. And what it is allowed to do is, it is allowed that the illicit commerce occurring within the prison systems and occurring outside of the prison system, from within the prison system, is creating turf wars. It is creating more incentives for more violence, because these individuals are already in prison for a reason. And the defendants in this case, who are alleged to have conducted this type of activity, are motivated to make money. And they see someone who has contraband, they want the contraband, they're going to take the contraband. And if they see someone who's affiliated with another gang or affiliated with another group, and for whatever reason, they're going to be motivated to try to have as much of a impact or footprint, if you will, in that prison wing, for either respect purposes or money purposes. So I think that's what's driving it, is money and power and respect, as they see it within the prison system. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on that. Money, power, and respect.
If Director Sterling can address, what changes were made after this as a result.
Sure, I can address that. A couple things you've already pointed out. We transferred, I think, 48 or 50 folks out of state who were problematic. We put up security netting. We've got scanners. Most of y'all came to the prison back in 2019 to see exactly what we've done. We've got cameras. We're doing, the prison is a completely different prison, by the way. We're doing a reclassification system. So when you come to prison, just so everybody knows, you're classified. Your minimum, your medium, or your maximum closed custody. We hired a national expert to come in and look at our system. We were overclassifying people. On April 15th, 2018, we had almost 1,600 folks that were incarcerated there, and just over 1,300 were maximum security prisoners. Today, we have just under 1,300 folks incarcerated there, and only 277 are maximum security prisoners. One whole yard is a medium security prison. We have the Academy of Hope there, as y'all have seen, and I don't covered this, but we actually had someone that was in the Academy of Hope. We had an officer that was being assaulted, and I would call it an attempted murder. And one of the folks from the Academy of Hope, used to be in the Academy of Hope, actually pulled the inmate off. He wouldn't have done that before after going through this program. We've got the Vera Institute of Justice returning promises. We've got drone detection. We've got a system to block, or to not block or jam, but actually to not allow illegal cell phone systems calls to go through. We actually are doing something that we haven't announced yet, but it's a violence indicator system. So we're looking at things that happen in an inmate's life while he's there, death in the family, loss of the job, maybe he hasn't gotten his parole or things of that nature, and we're looking at a list to try to intervene on folks before it's worked great in Indiana. I heard about it. We've hired a biostatistician to run the list, and we've done that. One of the things that you'll notice, cell phones for a high in 2016 were over 7,000 cell phones found statewide, 7,240. This year, and we've got a couple days left in this year, we're under 4,000 cell phones. That's a 45% decrease. During the Lee riots and a couple of years before, our violence was up. We had murders in the teens, assaults in the teens, and things of that nature. We've had 2 murders this year, and we hope that's it. What we hope when people come to prison that they take advantage of all the programs that we're offering. We've got the lowest recidivism rate in the country. That means people coming back to prison after 3 years. We've made it available for everybody to go through reentry programs. 85% get out in under 5 years, and they're back out amongst us. So for a while, it was just our low-level people. We've done our medium folks now, and then our long-term folks who are at our maximum security. They go down to Weaver, and they do a 2-year program that we're copying after what they did in Ohio, and it's very successful. Our recidivism rate is down. If people want to come to prison, they don't want to come to prison, I'm sorry. If people come to prison and they want to better themselves, the opportunity to